Remember the Forgotten.
Chapter 7. The Flowering Blade. The moon shone high in the dark, cloudless sky as Aurora and Zircon walked along the dirt road from Tinvernet, flanked on either side by long stretches of wild grass, and beyond that, the deep woods that seemed to have no end. The Flowering Blade Inn stood tall against the dark, deciduous landscape of dense trees behind it, a rightfully common stop for any and all travelling this road. The warm yellow glow from the windows felt welcoming as the pair of them pushed open the light doors of the rustic two-storey building and entered the warm and bright refuge from the cold night. Meanwhile, out in the darkness of the trees, there went, unnoticed, a pair of small eyes watching them from the gloom. The foyer of the Flowering Blade was a large square room, with walls of richly dark mahogany and a long yellow and green rug paving the way to the front desk at which sat a man. He lay back against his chair with a book in hand, grey bearded chin held up as he eyed the text through his round spectacles. Excuse me," Aurora called to him, crossing the rug and approaching the desk with Zircon in tow. The man jumped out of his seat upon glancing away from his book and spotting his new customers, throwing it to the desk and standing up with an embarrassed chuckle. "Why, hello there," he said. "Room for two, is it?" "Two for rooms, actually," Zircon corrected, voice dreadfully tired as he rubbed his weary eyes. "Coming right up," said the man, leaning down under the desk and fumbling with a bunch of keys before removing two from the ring and offering them outwards. "Room 3 and 4. That'll be 2 silver pieces, if you please." Aurora looked towards Zircon, eyes hoping. "You can get this, right?" she asked him. Zircon feigned patting his pockets with an expression of confusion. "I'm afraid I must have misplaced my coin purse in all the panic. Sorry, Aurora." Aurora sighed quietly, then reached into her pocket and handed the innkeep 2 silver coins. He finally dropped the pair of keys into her outstretched hand and gave the pair a nod. "Enjoy your stay," he said. Zircon sat on his bed. The plain but well-furnished room was dim, but the emerging lights of dawn flooded through the open curtain and forced him to face the other way, so as to protect his eyes from the pale beams. He put his head to the wall between the next room and his, listening intently. He stayed there for a few minutes, but heard not a sound. Eventually, he crawled carefully to the edge of the rickety bed, but the frame creaked and he cringed. He gently lay his heels onto the floorboards and tiptoed toward the door. Stepping outside his room, Zircon continued his silent journey, down the stairs and into the foyer, where the man at the desk was still, even now, reading his book. As Zircon passed him, the man stopped and looked. Just nipping out for some fresh air," Zircon told him, sneaking to the front door and giving him an awkward smile. The man nodded back uncaringly and returned to his book. The air outside was chilly, the sun being barely above the horizon and illuminating the vast sky a beautiful ocean-like shade of blue. All this time, and Zircon still hadn't slept a wink. He looked up at the second floor of the inn, but could see nothing through the dark windows. Then, turning back to face the road, he took his first step on what would be a long and tiring journey. Zircon heard a twig snap behind him. His face tensed as he let out a muted sigh, and he went to turn around, expecting to see an angry Aurora staring daggers at him. He didn't get the chance, though. His gasp was cut off as a cold hand placed itself in his mouth. He felt something grab him from behind as well, like another frigid arm wrapping itself around his waist. He tried to struggle, but all of a sudden both of the arms which bound him felt as solid as stone. He couldn't even turn his head to see what had accosted him. A muffled scream escaped his lips just as he watched a sudden figure step free from the shroud of the tree line across the road It was a woman, dressed in a dark robe with strands of wild black hair falling out of the hood. She began to approach Zircon quickly, her expression stern and determined, and something even more. Through the soul-rending stare of her deep, dark green eyes, she had a look of wrathful, desperate fury, like that of a concerned animal, more specifically perhaps, like that of a cornered predator. Despite her seemingly youthful appearance, something in those eyes, as they grew closer, seemed to betray an experienced mind, and one entirely gone of innocence. The woman continued to move towards Zircon, closing the gap between the two of them in seconds, and then proceeding to withdraw an object from the pocket of her long robe. It was a gem, almost spherical, red in hue and incredibly clear. The inner shapes of it almost looked like some kind of an eye. Zircon's own eyes widened in absolute terror as it was raised up in front of his face. Aurora opened her eyes. She sighed and stretched her arms outwards, pushing against the head of the bed before turning onto her side to peer out of the small room's window. The sun was rising, but she still felt tired, as if it was the middle of the night. Never having been the type to fall asleep in daylight, she yawned loudly and swung herself out of bed, headed towards the door. Out in the hallway, Aurora knocked 3 times on the door of the room she knew Zircon to be staying in. "Are you awake?" she called in. "We should get going as soon as possible. The city watch might come looking for us." There was no response. So Aurora put her ear to the door. Still, she heard no sound. She knocked again, and again, but no response came. She turned the knob and, to her surprise, the door swung open without resistance. Peering inside, she saw but an empty room. Her stomach knotted immediately, but she took a breath and remained composed, hurrying over to the window and peering out onto the ground below. Her eyes went wide. Down on the grass beside the road, she saw Zircon, hood up and eyes wide in terror, as his panicked body was held still from behind by what appeared to be some horrid human-sized creature, with grey skin, sharp teeth, and 2 demonic horns protruding from the top of its head. In front of Zircon, there was someone else. They wore a long, black coat that covered most of their form, but Aurora could just about make out flashes of long dark hair and a feminine figure. She held a strange red object, which seemed to glint brightly in the sun, right then held up in front of Zircon's frozen eyes. Aurora didn't waste a second. She turned around and bolted toward the stairs. Zircon stared deep into the red gem as it came closer, filling almost his entire vision and seeming to erase the damp, dreary landscape around it, while its glinting light entranced him so. He could not move, could not feel, he could only see. And as the moments passed, he wasn't so sure he could even do that. He felt something tugging on his mind, something tugging, then pulling, then heaving, shifting the thoughts and feelings he held so deeply, like water pouring from a slowly tipped barrel. As the seconds passed, he found himself uncertain of so many things. How did he get here? How long had this red gem been all he saw? Who was he? Aurora rushed down the stairs, her footsteps a cacophony of wooden thuds and creaks, past the foyer, past the innkeeper, who stared at her quizzically. "I hope you enjoyed your stay," his voice droned as she burst out through the front door. She ignored him entirely, turning her head frantically in a search for the dire scene she had surveyed from upstairs. However, she saw no sign of it, and that went only to increase her panic further. She ran past the side of the large building, a gust of wind blowing over the eerily quiet scene, all the way to the spot where she thought Zircon had stood. The lush grass had been visibly flattened in the struggle, but her attention was drawn away as she heard a low moan coming from behind her. She turned. On the grass, mere meters away from the side of the inn, was Zircon. He lay on the ground, propped up by his elbow as he rubbed his hand against his temple. His expression seemed pained, but as his eyes blinked rapidly, he seemed more so confused than anything else. Aurora ran over, calling his name worriedly before kneeling down to his level. "Are you okay?" she asked, tilting her head to look him over from head to toe. He had no visible injuries. He murmured, looking up at her and blinking some more. I think so, yes." "What happened?" asked Aurora. Who was that woman?" Zircon furrowed his brows and looked at her quizzically. "What? Who was she?" Aurora asked again between strained breaths, lowering herself to a cross-legged position beside him. "And what was that thing that was holding you?" The thing?" asked Zircon, brow furrowed further. Aurora looked at him worriedly, concerned at his continued confusion. "What's wrong?" I can't remember," said Zircon. "Can't remember what?" asked Aurora. Zircon aimed his puzzled gaze toward the ground and put his hand to his temple, eyes blinking rapidly as his brain worked to formulate his answer. "I can't remember anything." Aurora tilted her head in confusion. I don't understand." "My head," continued Zircon, pressing his fingers against it and cringing. "It feels empty." Aurora shuffled closer. "Really? Are you okay?" "Yes, began Zircon, then pausing. "It's odd, but I don't think I'm in any pain." "Just relax," Aurora told him, patting him on the shoulder gently. "You're safe now. That's what's important. You were probably just hit on the head or something." "Maybe," replied Zircon, blinking his eyes against the pale, cloud-filtered sunlight as if it were glaring, and turning to face his companion. "But who are you exactly?" "Don't worry about that now," said Aurora. "You've just had a big shock. Let's take a rest and get back on the road. You'll feel fine in no time, I'm certain." She reached down and grabbed his arm, helping him up to his feet as he eyed her quizzically. "Oh?" he asked. "Are we travelling together? Where are we going?" "Well, we're headed to Hillmaven," answered Aurora. "You're home." "Hillmaven?" Zircon repeated, looking ever so slightly in awe as they began to walk back towards the road. "Sounds pleasant."